I'm finally, after about a couple of years in, I'm finally doing a podcast and joining Kenneth here to kind of level and add more platforms and visibility and voices. To be more specific, add more voices to the Vietnamese community. So I want to first shout out Kenneth for encouraging me to do this, and but now I'm bringing him onto the live platform because this is where I feel most comfortable, and to bring you on and let's kind of do a quick roundtable and chat. So the first thing I kind of want to touch on is, since you and I have been in this landscape, and even before we did media at this level, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month has always kind of been, I felt, not as it's taken as seriously as it has been, or it is today in 2023. From what I saw today, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, but I believe the White House officially invited some key representatives from various different groups. I believe Gold House was represented, Asian Hustle Network, and all these other key leaders were all in DC and were met by the president and vice president herself. So my question to you is, why are you seeing a different shift in this particular year?
Yeah, and I think the answer is very simple. It's because we've organized. Simple, pure and simple. Asian Hustle Network with Maggie and Brian over there, they put it together a few years ago. Gold House with Bing and Jeremy, they put it a few years ago out there. TAF, all these guys began to do the legwork 4 or 5 years ago. So this is something that has been a groundswell, and I think it's something that is going to continue to keep going. But we in the Vietnamese community need to organize as well. We need to take a page book out of the bigger Asian American scene, and we need to organize and do our own thing, and we need to come up with our own sort of ways of being visible as well.
Yeah, I mean, both organizations you mentioned, Asian Hustle Network as well as Gold House, both have Vietnamese American founders.
Yeah.
But yet they went to they tackled a very diverse and challenging scope, which is going after the entire Asian American as well as Pacific Islander, and really elevated. And I think I want to go back to Gold House, because from the inaugural Gold Gala to what I saw, the Gold Gala, the second year was leaps and bounds, just much more. It felt very prestigious. It felt really important. The venue they chose, which I believe was the Disney Hall in Los Angeles. The fashion was absolutely, I think somebody even described it as the Met Gala for the Asian community. So let's talk about the Gold Gala in particular, and what do you think really made it just? I mean, it wasn't a small change. It was such a drastic change.
Yeah, I think again, going back to what Jeremy and Bing have done with the Gold House, is that they've really put a lot of effort and energy into planning, and they have money, and they really have a lot of intention behind representation. And that mission is so strong, and they go so hard at it, that when it's a physical manifestation of the beliefs that they have so strongly being manifested in a physical space, that's what you're seeing, that it's coming out of their brain. The intentions that they have, it's coming out, and it's beautiful what we see when we organize, and we organize with intention.
I think one other noticeable difference was corporate America definitely came out in support. And do you think that also came in parallel with on the heel of our big showing, the Asian Americans big show, Asians big showing in a lot of sectors, and at the Oscars, as well as with in the music industry with BTS and all these other major international brands coming here and I don't want to say take over, but dominating in some degrees. Like
Yeah, and I think this
one
is just the beginning that we're seeing. It's not even like we haven't even did a 1% yet. I think we're just starting to see because, you know, there's all these other projects and films and Sympathizer, Asian Baby Girl, all these films that shout out to Din. I just saw him on here and shout out to Tuna. You know, there are people that have been doing the entertainment business for 2 decades now, and they're grinding and they're putting the work in, and we're going to see the fruits of their labor in the next decade. And so I think, like I said, I think this is just the beginning, and more Asian American projects are being greenlit in Hollywood, and more musicians are, you know, with Mike Van at the helm of Billboard, president of Billboard, and many other people in agent positions and producing positions that we don't know yet about. They're there, you know, like your boy Jackson Wynn, you know, shout out to Jackson, who just, thank you for that introduction on the podcast. 7 Emmys. And I just heard
seven Emmys
another
exactly.
7 Emmys. And I've never even heard of him until you brought him up, right?
So
that's crazy.
you know what was crazy too, Kenneth, was when I really loved that interview. And for those who haven't checked it out, please check it out. It's the latest episode. But what I really loved about it, because I started tuning into UFC right around the time he came in. And I recall why I was interested. Because for those of you who don't know, I'm actually a big fan of the WWE because of the ability to brand build, tell stories, and so forth. That's why they switched it to entertainment. But what UFC has done during the story of, they took reality, the reality show format with The Ultimate Fighter. That particular fight was historic with Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin, I believe. And then beyond from that point of story, they were able, with Jackson at the helm, of kind of telling these development of the storyline of the fighters, and that's what made people care about the fight. It wasn't just the violence, but it became like, I'm rooting for this guy because of, you know, for his family or for, you know, or for his culture or whatever. And I felt that was what made the UFC really step away from the original product in the beginning, which was just a big guy fighting a small guy. It was kind of a circus show, I believe. That, you know, I never really watched the product, but you only I remember UFC before was just, it was, yeah, it was like mismatches, and I think that's why, and it was violent. It was extremely violent and not necessarily just competitive.
Yeah, and so you have Jackson at the back end, 7 Emmys. You have another guy named Don Bowie. I just heard about, you know, he's Fox Sports as well. You know, 5 Emmys. You know, so you got all these people who are like behind the scenes making decisions in Hollywood that are like Vietnamese people that we don't know about. So I am very excited to join you after a few of these years. In the last few years, there's so many people in the space that we're doing that need our amplification, that need the voice, that need us to really prop them up. I'm just not talking about you and me as us. I'm talking about me, you, and like 30 other.
Many others, actually.
Many other people should just be constantly going on each other's Instagram. We should be like surfing each other's show, getting on each other's podcasts, and really amplifying the work that guys like Don Bowie, guys like Peter Trin over at, you know, CAA, ICM, all these guys that are doing work like Jackson Wynn, Erin Tran, who just, you know, wrote Tourist Guide to Love. There's so many people in Hollywood that we need to, you know, bring into the fray and amplify, consistently amplify.
So there's one more name that I do want to mention while we're on this topic. So Apple TV just dropped a new series that was the showrunner, the creator and the executive producer is actually a Vietnamese French director. So it was it was Jackson who pointed that out, because he was extremely surprised by that, because he gets what was fun about our conversation is he was equally as excited to whenever there's another Vietnamese that he come across, because he you know, one thing that you and I we're much more because we're intentional. We're much more tapped in to uh, to what's going on with various different Vietnamese in different sectors. Myself more in music because that's just the lane that I've chosen. But yourself in now with books and authors and with film and television. But even between the two of us, there are still so much more guys that are doing great work that both of us have not spoken to. And to me, that's what continues to motivate me to do this, because if there's that much talent all over,
We
there's
should
there.
invite it. Look. No, it.
No, we were actually I'm gonna do a big shout out to Vic
Here,
because there's
shout out to Vit.
yeah,
And
because he what
glad Vit, shout out to Vit, and I'm glad that Vit, just because I was just gonna say in the neighborhood of food and chefs
oh
and
my
the
god.
concept of he is cutting edge. And then, like I said, he's starting a podcast as well.
So
So
no, and he's a phenomenal speaker. So I mean,
absolutely.
um, actually, I had Keynote right up next that I wanted to talk about, because as impressive as Goat Gala was and all these other events that the Goat House is producing, which was celebrating all Asians, but I, you and I, we're still trying to be the voice for the Vietnamese diaspora and also Vietnamese. And there's one sector that I think Viet has done an incredible job in terms of articulating his vision for Little Saigon. And I very rarely do I call somebody a visionary or see someone who is not just, because Vietnamese, there's a ton of entrepreneurs. We're badass entrepreneurs, and you've spoken to some badass entrepreneurs on your podcast, but a visionary requires they're just built differently. And what he was able to put together in terms of what his vision is for the next 10 years, with his company as a lifestyle brand or as a hospitality brand, starting with the foundation of Little Saigon, and kind of bringing that forward through starting with culinary. I think that's just the start of it. He's actually has a lot more.
Well, here's the deal with Viet and the rest of the entrepreneurs. Like when you're a food entrepreneur and you're a restaurateur, you could potentially do one restaurant, 10 restaurants, whatever, right? That's you just rolling out and you just like making money along the way. Viet is a different breed, and here's how he's different. He's thinking about the entire ecosystem
Absolutely.
of the experience, and it takes you to 2050. And it's all encompassing from front of the house, back of the house. It's AI. It's how people in the kitchen is experiencing key concepts, and how the kitchen and the customers and even the ownership is being thought of on every intricate detail. And that's the difference between just somebody who is doing entrepreneurship in food and a visionary, somebody who sees a clear world that is contained. And I am excited to, he just typed that we should have some of the rival Goat House, the Vietnamese. But I would add to that by saying that there's room for all of it, and there is space for all of it. Goat House's, COO over there is Jeremy Tran, another Vietnamese badass. So we should have our own Viet Gala at Key Concepts at Saigon Grand. Why not? And make it, there annually and blow it up. Why not? Why not do that, Viet? And create an event that every year, in the wintertime, we can have our own winter ball for Vietnamese folks, right? And we can honor people in all over the California or the U.S. And have our own Goat Gala, Viet Gala,
One of the alignment that I would say that I really resonated with his keynote speech and his vision was, and it's the same thing that I have for VidQ, which is we need to really understand the Generation A and Gen Z, and start building that bridge and building that communication with them through from an understanding point, and then start building products that that incorporates them. Because as you can see, and this is not really a knock to some of these previous entertainment brands in the Viet diaspora community. But when you don't when you preserve, when you don't start identifying the next 5 to 10 years, um, your 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 segment, your core segment, will become diluted, and in that you won't be able to introduce new that next generation into your audience base. And I think that's the reason why, when in terms of what he mentioned earlier during the keynote, where he's starting to see Gen A's and Gen Z's and millennials as his team members, as well as his uh, the audience that will appreciate the entire brand. It's I think you have to think in that way. And that's why, for myself, in terms of the music creators that I'm starting to really build a more formal relationship with, it is actually the Gen Zs. And it's not a knock to the millennials or to a generation from my era, but it's because the Gen Zs, I feel I'll give you an example. There's a 15-year-old kid out of Bosa right now that his numbers already as a 15-year-old is he's getting about 250,000 monthly listeners. His songs are getting about 200 to 300,000 per song. And here's the impressive part: none of his product, to the standards of, let's say, Keshi or Twee, where they studio records type stuff, he's not at that quality. But here's the thing: his audience, which is the TikTok audience, and the community built on Discord, has been able to elevate his support system to where his audience is large. And I think that's what I find
That's
is
the way.
really that's what I find is going to get him when this guy gets to college. His numbers could get to Keshi's numbers. And I talk a lot about Keshi in terms of his growth, and when he eventually put out his music in his college years, that entire crowd is now at a state where they're at a place in where they can support him financially by going to all his shows, because they grew up with him, supporting him. And I
Yeah,
think that's
and
it takes.
the beauty of introducing this young person is that now we can start to pay attention, and then we can bring him into our ecosystem,
Yeah,
right? And why not have a performance at Key Concept or Saigon
Saigon Grand,
Grand,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and make Saigon Grand a cool place to be, and make it a place that we all want to be at, and
It's the
party.
playground anyway, because I mean,
Yeah,
you can dress up, because I'm a show producer. You can dress that place up any different way, as long it just takes a good imagination and just a good team to
yeah,
execute. But in addition to that, also, while you're there in that plaza, this is, I know it seems like we're plugging Key Concept a lot, but there's so many different dining options there, where you literally can dine at any cuisine. This is not even just
yeah.
Asian cuisine. And then after that, pop on over and have a great cocktail and enjoy some shows. So I do want to touch on comedy real quick, because there was another, there's an event that happened in New York, and I want to shout out Leo Win from DC, actually. Him and a Hungarian Vietnamese artist by the name of Hien, they put together a festival that was very well received. It was called Vui Vẻ Festival. Beautiful name. Leo curated the comedy lineup, and because he's a stand-up comedian himself, he also brought together Mike Win from Asian Not Asian. He got three other Vietnamese. Female Vietnamese artist named a comedian named Ngọc Bui. There's Vince, I believe. Let me just get his name right. It's Victor Tran, who's a Filipino Vietnamese. He did yeah, and these are all like new guys, and there's another OG over there called Anchiet. But so what was really special about this particular Vui Vẻ festival was they held it at this restaurant called Nha Minh, my house, right? With the owner's name is Fred Hua, and from the reception, I literally posted this thing on Sunday. I interviewed Leo on Monday. The show was on Tuesday. They packed out a Tuesday night. 250 people packed out Nha Minh's freaking restaurant, right? And then it was phenomenal. Like, and then also the support from the East Coast. I was my like that flyer got passed around so much from the VQ page. I was shocked. So I was like, I did that as a favor, and I didn't really anticipate that kind of support. And so now I saw today that they started doing they created their own Instagram page because it was just a one-time thing. Looks like they're already in talks of doing another one. And then also at the end of the month, Asian Vietnamese boat people, the podcast, they're also going to be doing another event at Niamen, and then I was asked to present a couple of performers for the event as well. So, man, if shout out to the East Coast, we got Tuan in the building
What's up?
also,
Juan,
and I
but
they always say that the West Coast always gets all the attention,
yeah,
but the East Coast definitely is still strong. I think it's just there needs to be a few more of these different
yeah.
events.
I was going to tell you about, you said Sean Porter,
Yep.
but Sean Porter was performing under the banner of Embarrassed by Night by Fred Lay and Andy Van, which those guys have like now really cornered the West Coast market because they did Embarrassed by Night like 4 times already. So it's their play on Paris by Night. So it's Embarrassed by Night. It's all Vietnamese lineup. And then they have another one called 626 Laugh Market, which is once a month in Monterey Park here. And they are a Pan-Asian lineup, but Pan-Asian, but they have, it's overwhelming Vietnamese comics. So now we have East Coast, West Coast Vietnamese comics, which is amazing now. I mean, I'm so happy that, yeah.
There's also another group called No MSG added. There's a couple of Vietnamase performers in here. So
where's No MSG
they're out
added?
here in Anaheim.
Dang.
So so honestly, I'm one of the things I wanted to talk about to Leo about, and maybe to bring him and Fred maybe need to get together and let's do a Vui Vẻ festival, because I think the name is awesome.
Amazing.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, all these guys, the comics, they come up with these cool names. Vui Vẻ, Embarrassed. Laugh Market. Anybody who knows these inside references knows how culturally relevant these names are.
Right. So, there's a few other topics I do want to talk about in terms of events, and then we're going to go into sports, because there's actually something that I turned you on to, some really cool things happening in sports. But to kind of finish off on the event, we talked a lot about the really supporting the next generation.
Yeah.
And with over this past weekend, something that personally I never thought was going to happen, which was a young group of organizers being able to kind of bring an art show as well as some cultural elements, and bring different kind of music to Asian Garden Mall football hall. For those of you who are, I'm pretty sure everybody on here is familiar with it, but to see personally Asian Garden Mall have a different look to it and different audience to it, it felt, to me, it felt kind of historic. So I think that being that it was also the same weekend with the Gold Gala, I think it's really important that guys like us and also many others were there to support what was really actually a challenging community event, because it is a big venue and a big tall order to produce and organize something like this.
For their first event, they knocked it out of the park. The attendance was great, awesome. I know there was some logistic issues, there were some gallery issues that people probably complained about, but I want everybody to know to take it easy. This is our first event. Like the 626 night market in Arcadia in Pasadena, it was a shit show. It was a hot mess, but those guys, the organizers, they iterated and they got it through. They just kept working at it and they kept pushing it. And, they got to where they needed to go. I wanted to shout out to Tai Wing. Hey, Tai, how are you?
How you doing, Tai?
But yeah, I think that the youth, these young generation, the VCC, the Vietnamese Creative Collective, did a great job organizing and getting the word out. And I hope to see them doing more of these shows and just getting better. And I hope that the community can forgive all of the little organizing things that, it's their first time and they're young. So we should have a level of forgiveness and love and compassion for these young men and women who put a tremendous effort in putting the show together. And also shout out to Frank Zhao, who allowed
Oh my God, yeah.
space and let you do the podcast there. And you know what a big community supporter Frank Zhao is.
I would also say, you know, I also know that Frank Zhao rarely comes out to community
Yeah,
events. And this one, he was extra excited. And I think he's been wanting, you know, because this space is very important to him, this building, right? He when he built it, I mean, you had a great one-on-one with him on your podcast, but you know, I think for him to see that it's losing its, I wouldn't even say relevance, but it doesn't have that same level of excitement that it used to, or significance to this next generation. There's a part of him that really wants to find a way to connect. And I think that with actually with Chris Tran over at the Little Saigon Official, that kind of really spearheaded this relationship between the Vietnamese Creative Collective and then also Hot Noise for bringing the expertise on the art show side. It happened. So I'm extremely proud. I work really closely with the collective themselves, and I know how much time and effort they all have day jobs as well,
yeah,
and they put everything until like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. I know on Friday just to even make this thing happen. So I'm extremely proud of them, and things happen, and you need resources, and I think you need support, and you need enough volunteers and resources to continue to drive and do this again.
Yeah. I hope that they don't stop. I hope they don't give up. I hope that they continue to iterate and do more. But they have, these leaders inside the community like Frank Zhao or Viet from Key Concept that they should team up with, and they should ask questions and perhaps, vacillate back and forth from event space to event space, because each one of these locations has its own magic, has its own luster, has its own history. And I think that there's nothing wrong with like doing some here, doing some over there, and sharing the energy and organization with Saigon Grand and Phu Quoc Ta. And, in the summertime, I think there's a lot. Here's Chris Tran.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's popping in. So, but I do one thing that I was actually, I guess I didn't know where all these artists, they did a wonderful job finding all 21 artists to represent the illustrators and the visual art side. They came from as far north as Toronto, Canada. And yeah, and then also I spoke to a young lady all the way out in Atlanta, Georgia, and they came from everywhere, man.
Yeah.
And I was like, so as I was expecting, I just expecting everyone from California, because that's just what we're used to. But then when I was like, hey, where are you from? I flew out here from Georgia. I'm like, so my first question I asked them was, what does this mean for you? Like, what does this event mean for them? And for them as an artist and as a creator, being able to showcase their talent and their work to what they hope is going to be a receptive audience or crowd, that meant the world. And to do it in the iconic Asian Garden Mall, I think that was like the cherry on top.
I mean, what's more fulfilling in life than to have your community come together and rally around your own expression in your head? There's nothing more happy. There's no more sensation for like people like Mickey Dojo, who has a band, we can't wait to see her music out either. There's so much expression in our community that one day we as a community will be so much more vocal and have a place like Saigon Grand and Phu Quoc Ta to have these places to really express our whatever it is, music or poetry or art or comedy. It's happening, and it's happening right in front of our own eyes, and I'm so excited.
It's come a long way since when I started VQ in 2020 to what it is today, and to again see now that the pandemic's over, and to see live events, live shows, these from all different sizes kind of come back to life. It now further motivates me to go ahead and start creating at that level again. Because for those of you who don't know about my background, I do have a very live production type of background. In addition to being a performer myself, but I was, for lack of a better word, I was shy to kind of really showcase all that. And with guys like Kenneth and also Chris Tran continues to keep on believing in me and and to give me a bigger voice and confidence in that, I'm now bringing my voice out there. So
can I ask you something? So how does the community know, like, a calendar of events? How, like, is there a place that they can go and go, okay, in the month of May, in the month of June, July, here are the cultural events. Is there a center that
no,
we
there.
can check?
So for what I would say is, in terms of, this is where I think Goat House we can model a lot after, because they've done a great job building a database and a centralized database of various different sectors. And I think, and I don't know as far as events, because Goat House is a members driven type of organization. So what I feel for our community, and we have the right amount of stakeholders, I do believe we can create a um, centralized place for dates that's happening all around the US as well as Canada, because I do have a lot of community members out there as well. And I just also opened up a new division out in Australia. And I have a great leader out there, Michael Hushke, who is working really closely with the various different Vietnamese communities. So I think that there's probably a need, because one of the purpose of me doing a lot more lives as on VidQ is I always felt like I get invited to so many different events, but what I can do a better solid for a lot of these event organizers is to give them a platform to promote it, right? I don't have a TV station, but I feel like at least my voice and being able to talk about their event in real time, just like what happened with Viva and also what happened with the Di Quê Nhà, like being able to interview the organizers and do it a couple of days before just to lend a little bit more support. I would love to continue to do that. So I think a calendar of events happening all over the place,
Yeah.
and maybe that's an initiative that we could really
we
do a call out for.
like have, like a Gold House type of place that when, Vietnamese from all over the country, they know, like, if they're flying into, California, then they know, like, that week there's these events happening. Like, for example, in DC, there's going to be like the Vietnam week that's going to be happening, and there's a gala, and then you can go to the Smithsonian, you can go to all of these museums that actually have these organized things by Erin Steinhauer. She's putting together for Vietnam Society. And it would be beautiful if we had a calendar for the entire year, and people like Erin can just, from Vietnam Society, can say, hey, here is what's going to happen. I wonder if there's anything like that right now. I don't think there's a dedicated to any Vietnamese events throughout the United States. And that
I think if we were to organize this this initiative, it would be one of the first, because I also can see what's added to this is various different movie screenings, also various different
releases,
concerts that are happening, like when Keshi was on tour alongside with Twee, alongside with some of these other acts that I promote. Imagine that, like, there'll be, you can kind of just check all that out, all that in one place. So, that's a great idea, man. I really I really dig that idea.
A lot of bandwidth, though.
Okay, now I want to transition to sport, because one of the things that was really important for me, and now I'm glad you also got to speak very in detail with Jackson, because his whole world, his whole career was built around sports. Is how what I said to you before was sports. I feel is very impactful, because it's these everyday, like everyday stories of greatness and of competition, and it's more relatable, right? I felt like when I was promoting music, I'm a music fanatic, but like I and a fan, but like I think with sports, looking at my brother-in-law who who's very involved in his daughter's like soccer career, and at a young age, that was the way to kind of to really to really elevate and showcase some of the stuff that's happening. So one storyline that I was following is since 2022, the women's 3x3 the women's basketball team in Vietnam. So there was a young lady that you interviewed. Her name is Miley Jones that was going back with her father to compete in that SEA Games. But there was also another pair of amazing athletes. They go by the Trung twins, who already had a lot of hype in college at Gonzaga during their sophomore year. They came back to Vietnam that year and they were able to compete in both the 3x3 and 5x5 and brought home the bronze medal in that 2022
Wow.
Vietnam Games at the SEA Games. But what just happened literally 3 days ago was the girls came back and very unannounced this time. They did, it wasn't a, unless you were following, you wouldn't even know they returned back. And they competed in the Cambodia SEA Games. And they went up against the favorite. They're like the USA of Southeast of the APEC region, which is Team Philippines, and they finally beat Team
Wow.
Philippines in the gold medal and brought home the gold medal for Vietnam. So here's the significance for that. This is the first, and keep in mind, Vietnamese basketball for the country of Vietnam in a professional level has only been around since I believe in the 2014, 2015. So it's still quite a young sport, but it has gained popularity because of, there's another young man I'm going to talk about too, Christian Juzang and Johnny Juzang. But these two young ladies brought home the gold, and I think the entire country, they, this is like their Michael Jordan moment. And I
Right.
felt it's such a beautiful thing to share. And, and you know, and that's why I think it's sports to me. It's in highlighting these athletes is very very
Yeah,
important.
I agree, and I think a lot of us are in and follow sports. We were in sports, but I would venture to say that most of us did not. And you know, growing up in America, a lot of us did, but most of us probably didn't partake much. And that was maybe because of
Yeah,
survivability, or we had to, you know, whatever the case. But representation in the sports world in America and internationally is such a big thing. I mean, that's why big colleges and universities pour so much money into sports programs, because it highlights and it increases brand awareness, whether you're Vietnamese, Cambodian, Filipino, you're from USC, UCLA, whatever that is. It highlights and it magnifies the brand of the money that's going into that direction.
and now and just to kind of bring it back here to the US side, for the very first time, you know, two Vietnamese American or two Americans of Vietnamese heritage actually were drafted. One was drafted and one got picked up after the draft into the NBA. So the first one was Jalen Williams. He's a young man out of Arkansas. Had a phenomenal March Madness, and he was drafted by the Oklahoma City Thunders, making him the first ever American-born Vietnamese to make it into the NBA. And then the other is the younger brother of Christian Juzang, which I'll expand on in just a bit, who I had the pleasure of interviewing. He now plays for the Utah Jazz. So with Christian Juzang, the reason why I'm going to bring it back to me, so he was that poster boy child, a star that had a very similar story to Jeremy Lin, where he went to Harvard. They made it that season. It was the COVID season. They were supposed to make it to March Madness, which brought back a lot because of him being one of the only Asians at Harvard. They brought back a lot of similarities between Jeremy Lin and him, but he ended up going to Vietnam to play for the VBA. And that year, the Saigon Heat, which was the team that he was brought in to play for, they won the championship prior. So he had a lot of high expectations to win a championship again, and he delivered. He came there, he delivered, he won a championship. He also stayed and played for the national team. And you know, unfortunately, these other teams were just crazy. They're just much more stacked. But I believe Vietnam competed as well as they could. But unfortunately, they weren't able to medal in that particular season. But a documentary So on the heel of that, I was talking to Jackson about his storytelling and being able to tell these stories. On the heel of that, a good friend of mine who is the director of the documentary, he just joined us right now, Grady Nguyen, who's living in Vietnam, did a whole documentary on Christian Juzang's experience. So it literally just released on YouTube a few days, 2 days ago, and I have yet to finish watching it, so I'm going to watch it for sure. But I wanted to point that out
The
because
documentary.
the name of the documentary is called Juicy. So Juicy is his nickname, and I had a chance to talk to interview Christian when he came back from Vietnam for the to surprise his brother during I don't know if you're a UCLA fan or you have any you have a lot of relationships with the UCLA, but that March Madness in 2022, I believe, or 2021, his younger brother Johnny Juzang was going wild and crazy for them, and they took UCLA to had a really good run. But so his brother surprised them. Christian surprised them, flew all the way back to America, and was there for that game. So I got a chance to talk to him after that experience.
I would love to get brothers on the podcast on Vietnamese. They sound like amazing, fantastic young men.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the topic that we talked about on our on my episode on your podcast was what happens, which is the #1 sport in the world, as well as the most decorated sport in Vietnam, which is soccer. And that particular episode, I was sharing that there's a high chance that we're going to be seeing Vietnam in the World Cup. I didn't know it was going to be happening in 2023, but it is happening. So the women's Vietnam national team has qualified and are playing in the 2023 World Cup in July, and it is a monumental achievement for the country.
Wait,
but what's even
the
women's soccer team
is playing in the World
are
Cup.
playing in this year's World Cup. But what makes things even crazier now is that they drew the USA, which are the giants in this sport for women's soccer, as their first game.
So look, I have been told not to ask the question that you're going to ask right now, but when the flag comes up, where do we cheer for? How are we in Bosa, like on the Bosa Boulevard on the main strip? How do we honk our horns and wave our flags? I mean, what flag are we going to wave?
And in talking about the flag, I think flags are very
touchy.
It's touchy, and it's also very easily politicized because I think there's a deeper layer to every symbolism and representation, and some people use it as a way to bully you too. Like, are you American enough, or are you Vietnamese enough? And you know what? And this is something that I'm going to be more of a commentator and see it how it goes down. But I want to share 2 point of views. One is, as a Vietnamese person myself, to see excellence, the women's team achieving this. I mean, it's not easy to say that you got into the World Cup, and they are a phenomenal team. You need to recognize that. I feel like as a Vietnamese, there's so much pride to say that we have a team in the World Cup.
But is it your team, Johnny?
I would say,
is it your team? I have an answer to that. You asked me, is it my team? It is my people.
Yeah, it's my people. Yeah, and they represent the same heritage that I have. It's my blood, right? At
the end of the day, we are going to have to commentate. We're going to have to make comments, and we're going to have to sit on the sideline and not discount the pain of our parents' generation, but we also have to honor their experience and their lived trauma. But at the same time, we almost have to separate the second generation's sort of like life. We
second
live
and third. Second and third. Like, it's so.
We live in a completely different time warp. And, you know, maybe another 5 years from now, thank you, whoever, Chung Ali, thank
Chung
you.
Ali, he's yeah, a great friend of mine out there in Australia. So thanks, Chung Ali,
Yeah.
for that comment.
Yes, this is a very legit discussion because it's going to come to a point where one day the men's are going to get in the World Cup and they're going to keep advancing. And once it advances, somebody's going to have to start commenting from the United States. Somebody's going to start talking about it. And Johnny, I welcome it. I welcome it because
Absolutely.
my grandfather was put to death by the other side. My uncles and aunts all lived through the trauma. We all went through this stuff. My dad, we all escaped. We all belong to a certain side. But at the same time, we have to start recognizing that there are people that are related to our blood, our heritage, that's coming out of the country. And we have to figure out a way to make peace with 98 million people in Vietnam. So we just have to like start talking about it now. We start talking and discussing this now.
Now I want to say the motives and the reasons for these women, the entire team, they are there not to represent just the country. I can honestly say they are there to represent their heritage and they represent, like, you know, where, you know, being Vietnamese. And that's what I feel they're going to do. And you know, now at the same time, when they do face against Team USA, which are favored to win, you know, and I'm an American myself, so I always tell people I am proud to be an American, because if it wasn't for this country, I wouldn't be who I am today. But at the same time, you know, it's going to be a great battle. I hope it to be a competitive battle, but it's, you know, it's going. I think in Bosa, here in Little Saigon, I am truly. I do want to see what's going to happen at the various different bars.
Honest with you, I don't want to watch these matches with Chris Tran. I want to watch it with Chris Tran's dad. I want to watch it with I want to watch, because me and Chris Tran and you, we all look at it the same. We all are on the same team. We see life a certain way. I want to chill with the guys who are like protesting against this stuff. I want to hear how they, because we need to have this dialogue. And what more fun way to do it than at a women's soccer? I want to hear what they think. Who you guys cheering for, right?
You know, I welcome this conversation. So I really do. Maybe one of the things that is a very popular format that a lot of these young content creators are doing is they go out on the street armed with the camera and literally just, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And just getting that, right? Like I'm not adding any more opinion to it. I'm just asking the question because I think it is an important question to continuously ask and see how people view it. And when the game happens,
I think it's just fun to instigate at this point, right? Like, I mean, do we have to like really talk about our position? Do we have to like give away our position? Because it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter at this point. But let's just break the ice and because at some point we're going to have to work in lockstep in 10 years from now with artists from Vietnam, writers from Vietnam, filmmakers from Vietnam. We're doing it right now. We just don't wait flags, but we do it now. We work with people from all over the globe that are Vietnamese people, you know, and it's a proud moment to be Vietnamese. So anyway, enough of my rant. I mean, I can just go on for, I do need to get off and jump off for dinner with my family, but I don't know how, I mean, we're going to be doing this quite often, Johnny, and
I think that my goal in this is to create this, because we catch up anyway, and I think that it's more fun to do this on this platform. So let's just keep it up. Either I feel we can keep this talking on a weekly basis. Let's just aim for it on a weekly to bi-weekly basis. But I think an hour of this is absolutely great and healthy, and and we can also talk about what we got going on next.
Yeah. And I think when you and I are like fighting for airspace to talk, when there's two of us, that's when the best energy is, right? Because if like we're just like kind of bored and there's like, because I'm like trying to like put in a word and you're trying to put in a word, and that kind of energy, that's what we need to be, that's what we be needing to be doing every week, right? We just need to
We
be
need to,
like,
yeah, and I think that's what's going to happen is, there's going to be a couple of guys that listen to us that's going to want to do this as well,
yeah,
and there are going to be more platforms.